one.
Hi Mom, hi Pop, it's me, Baba. I'm doing this as me, not as the Nutty Professor, but I'm doing it as a podcast. I had considered doing it privately, only for the two of you, but I've decided that I want to tell the story about Pop's accident and his remarkable recovery, survival and recovery, and I want to do it as a birthday edition podcast. So, Pop, you'll be seeing this on October the 9th, and it's going to be your 89th birthday. So, happy birthday, Pop! And I wish you guys were here. I'd be giving you your gifts. We'd go out to your favorite Greek restaurant this evening for our lamb chops. You love lamb chops on the Danforth, but you're going to be going out with your friends and family and household there. And I might go out with relatives here to celebrate if they're available. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to do this podcast for you. So before I actually begin the story of your accident, I also want to address Mom. I'm Mom, and I was very worried, as you know, over the weekend because I thought that you were very, very sick, and I kind of had a bit of a panic and everybody. But the good thing is, everything's okay. It was a false alarm and it was a fever, but you've recovered and you're home. And so, hi Mom, and I'm glad you're home. I'm glad you're better. However, at this point, I'm going to start the story a bit. You can watch a little bit more, but when I start telling the actual story about the accident, maybe you should leave the room. Because, and you've heard this. It's not that you haven't heard this before. You've heard this story at least 100 times. Ever since the accident, I've been telling everybody that asks, how did it happen? So I've been telling the doctors and the nurses and the staff at the hospital and the friends and the family. So this is probably the 152nd time I'm telling the story. And you've heard it many times, but I know that you get upset every time you hear it, and especially since you've been sick lately, maybe you shouldn't hear this all over again, trigger all those memories, But the reason I'm telling it is that it's a remarkable story, and I was going to tell it anyway, I was going to tell it as a car podcast about the Sebring, but now I'm going to do it as a birthday edition podcast for Pop, for you, because I think I want people to hear the story, and it's a testament to your strength and your fortitude and your resilience that at the age of 88. Now, I was also debating whether to actually reveal that today is your 89th birthday, but I don't think we have anything to hide, and the fact that you were 88 when this happened makes this a much more remarkable story, So I'm going to have to start with a little background, and now the story is for us, but since I'm telling it to however many, not thousands, but hundreds of people at least are going to watch this. So I'm going to have to put in a little bit of backstory just for the whole thing to make a little bit of sense and be coherent. And the fact that the people, so I'm now going to switch and I'm going to address the viewers. And I'm addressing the viewers of the Nutty Professor podcast from the Edge. And most of you have probably seen bits and pieces of my previous podcasts. So you know a little bit about me, you know a little bit about our car collection. You've seen some of the cars, you've seen the Porsche. It's up, it's posted. So I would advise for people who haven't yet seen the Porsche video, have a look at that, because Porsche plays a big role in this story. And I'm going to talk about the Sebring. The Sebring is gone, but my editor student is going to have some pictures of it, so you'll see some before and after pictures. So now, just to fill you in a little bit, I am an only child. And when I was a prof, that was one of my big topics, and I have lectures available online. You can have a look, TVO, Sohail Rashid. You'll see me talking about birth order and only children, and how, and in my case, I was particularly close to my parents, and it happens sometimes. I have marked a lot of papers where students would say, sometimes when you have an only child, instead of a dyad, instead of two people, it becomes a triad. It becomes like a very close-knit unit. And it's very hard sometimes to separate. And that's kind of what happened with us. We were, and we are very, very close. But my father and I are also very strong personalities, and we've had our clashes, but we always make up. Sometimes it would take a few days or a few weeks, but we're very strong, and we're very strong-willed, but we love each other very much, and same with my mother, the three of us. 4 of us, because you got to include Agita, the cat, So it became like a family of 4. Now, I'm going to talk more about this in another podcast, but for the last 20 years or so, after my parents retired, my parents had a condo here in Toronto, and they had a condo in India, where they come from. I'm not going to name the city. They had a condo, and that condo is in a building where a lot of their other relatives live. And they also have a household there. They have people that work for them. In India, they have some maids, they have a driver who are like family, and then they have actual family living in the building. So the last 20 years, what they've been doing is they would go in October when it started to get cold here. They'd go to India, they'd stay there until April, and then they'd come back. And then from April till October, they'd be here with me. I ended up selling my own house when I left teaching. I bought some properties in Niagara. I was going to, rent a couple out. Didn't work out. So then I bought a house out in the country, about 3 hours away. And that property, it's on Lake Erie. It's a country house. And it was like a summer house that belongs to me. And I have another property there where we keep the cars that you've seen in the collection. We have a storage garage, but it's half an hour away from the cottage. I call it a cottage, but it's really a house, So it's about half an hour away from the house, So it's sort of like I'm not a very good artist, but so this would be like Lake Ontario. This would be like Lake Erie. So this is Toronto. So you go like that. You go the Highway 41, and you go past London, Ontario, and you come to a little village. I'm not going to name it, a little village, and that's where I have a storage garage, which takes 6-7 cars, So we store the cars there, and then my house is on the Lake Erie, another half an hour later, that way, towards Windsor, So I'm doing all of this so that you'll get an idea of what was going on, the day of the accident. Now, in summers, we would spend time at the cottage, the house, and my parents would come with me. And I wouldn't see them all winter. So in the summers, we spent a lot of time together. They would come with me. We had the cars out there. We'd take the cars to car shows. We'd drive them around. We'd go on cruises. And we'd take the cat with us. And everything was okay until last year. My house got flooded. So it was under reconstruction. It's still under reconstruction, It's going very slowly, but it's not a priority anymore because everything else has happened. So the last year, and another thing happened last year, my mother's health was going down, and her mobility was reduced, and she had a few falls, and we were all kind of upset because the end of last year, so we're talking a year ago now, so October the 8th of 2018, my parents were scheduled to go back to India and possibly just stay there, and we thought that my father may come back and forth. My father may, come for 3-4 weeks in the summer, but my mother and I, we will probably never meet again because I don't fly and I don't like India. And that's a separate podcast. I'll talk about why another time. So, but we were all upset, and my mother's health was going down. We didn't like to leave her at home alone because she'd had a few falls, and and the last minute I did everything. Usually you have to get the cars ready for storage, you have to fill them with gas, put in an additive so that it doesn't freeze, you got to disconnect the batteries. So I did quite a bit of that, and I got the cars registered, but so maybe 2 days before they were to leave. They were to leave on the 8th of October, which was a Monday. And on Saturday, which would have been the 6th of October, 2018, we left my mother with her friend in Toronto. And my father and I went in the BMW, and I'm going to do a podcast on that car as well. It's a BMW convertible. It had to be taken back to storage. So we go to the garage first. So the garage is half an hour this side, Toronto side, before we get to the house. So we get to the garage, we drop the BMW, we pick up the Sebring convertible. And you'll see some pictures of that one too, before and after the accident. So we pick up the Sebring convertible, we go get gas in it, put the additive in, and then we drive the half an hour to the house. And the Porsche is at the house. We have the car spread out over the summers. And the Porsche was parked behind the house in a car tent. And it was kind of damp back there, so the Porsche was giving a little trouble, But we had to get it back to the garage where it would be stored for the winter. So, and you guys will have seen the Porsche already in the Porsche podcast. So, my father is driving the Porsche, and he is behind me. I am driving in front in the Sebring convertible with the hood up. And it's a half an hour drive on country roads. So you go through a small town, and then you turn on a road, and it's a 2-lane road, there's shoulders, gravel shoulders, and sudden thunderstorm. It just freak thunderstorm, and it just started pouring, and there's thunder, and there's lightning, and the visibility was almost zero. And I'm looking behind me. I'm driving on the small road, and I'm looking in my rearview mirror at my dad's lights, and he's in the Porsche. He's 88 years old, and he's still driving, and he's a car collector. He loves his cars. There had been maybe the year before a possibility of his giving up driving, but he said, I can still drive, I'm fine, no problem. He passed the test, everything was good, So he's driving behind me, and later on I find out he was a bit worried about the Porsche, because it was, giving a bit of trouble, and it wasn't, because it was damp and it had been in the car tent. So he's behind me in the Porsche, and I'm in the Sebring. I look in my mirror, and at one point, I can't see his lights anymore. And I could barely see the lights anyway, because there's very little visibility. So I'm looking, and I don't see lights. So I decide to turn around and go looking for my father, So I try to make a U-turn. So this is like the road. So we're going this way, we're going east, and I try to make a U-turn in the Sebring. So I go like that, I try to make a U-turn so I can go back this way, go west, and see what happened to my father. So I'm making a U-turn, but there was very little visibility, and I misjudged how wide the shoulder would be. I thought it would be about that big. It's about that much, And the front wheels of the Sebring go into the grass. And I've taken a couple of pictures. Again, my student might, my producer might include them. Sebring is gone. So the other day when I went out there, I used a substitute. I used the BMW. And it's also convertible, so you'll have to imagine that's kind of like what the Sebring looked like, with the wheels sort of in the ditch. And the wheels got stuck in the ditch, and I'm spinning them, and I go back and forth, and I rocket, and I almost get out. And I almost got out. And then I said, one more rock, and in the next rock, I went further into the ditch. Instead of coming all the way out, I went right into the ditch. And you know something? That's what saved my life, because otherwise I wouldn't be here now. When the pickup truck hit the Sebring, I would have been killed, because, but as it was, the Sebring went further into the ditch. It went further that way, Now, I'm sitting in the Sebring. It's a convertible. There's rain pelting on the roof, and I can't hear anything, and my father doesn't have a cell phone. He doesn't believe in them. I have a cell phone, My father doesn't like phones, So if he had a cell phone, I would have said, where are you? I'm in the ditch, but don't panic. Just pull over somewhere. Wait until the storm abides, and then we'll, I've got a phone. We'll call Wright's Towing. We'll get the car out. Just park somewhere, get out of danger, pull over somewhere, and wait. But I don't have a cell phone. And he doesn't have a cell phone. I have a cell phone. He doesn't have one. So I'm sitting there, and then I thought I saw lights on the road, and they stopped. Now, I don't know if this is my father. I don't know if it's police. I don't know if it's a tow truck. I don't know if it's a passersby. So I'm sitting in the Sebring, and I thought I saw lights. Then should I get out? Should I wait? And then maybe a minute or two later, I thought I heard, so I'm sitting like this, and there's a passenger seat here, and there's a passenger window of the Sebring, and I thought I heard a tapping. So by the time I find the windows, remember, it's come up in previous podcasts, all the windows in different cars are in different positions. So I'm looking in the middle for the power window buttons. They're not in the middle, The Sebring, they're on the left where they should be, but I'm so used to the BMW and the other cars where it's in the middle, So a Corvette. So I find the power window buttons for the Sebring, and I put down the passenger side window, and the rain's coming, and it's dark, and I don't see anybody there. And I'm like going, maybe that was just the sound of the rain. And I had just decided I'm going to get out. I said, I'm going to get out, and I'm going to see who that is and what is happening. So I had my hand on that door handle, and just before and if I had actually got out of that car, I might have been also very badly injured or killed, So particularly if I had walked towards the Porsche. If my father hadn't made it to where he was, and I had gone towards the Porsche, I would certainly have been killed, So, but I had my hand on the door handle, and then crash! And I was like, and I was disoriented, but I'm still aware. And I'm like, oh, shit, And I knew there had been an accident, but I didn't know for sure if my father was outside or not. But I got hysterical, and I opened the door. And when I opened the door and I got out, and I wasn't wearing my jacket, I wasn't wearing a hat, and when I got out, I saw the Porsche was there with the door open. And I've taken a picture of the BMW. You have to pretend that's the Porsche, So with the door open, and my father had parked the Porsche this way, in oncoming traffic. So this is traffic coming this way that is heading west, and he had left the Porsche facing oncoming traffic with the blinkers on, and he had parked ahead of the Sebring. So this pickup truck is coming along. It sees flashing lights. So what it does is it swerves to the right. It can't see the Sebring because it's dark, and the Sebring's lights are on, but they're pointed into the ditch. So what it does is it hits the passenger trunk side of the Sebring. And I got some pictures which my editor will be showing you hopefully. So, and then what happens is the Sebring moves with the impact sideways, And my father, if he had still been on this side where he had tapped on my passenger window, it would have been certain death because he would have been, squished, So he's walking around this way, and he's about here. And we've got another picture where of the driver's side of the Sebring, and you will see a dent. And that car, by the way, it was mint. It was like brand new. It was like all of our cars, So that dent was caused by my father's body, when the car hit him. Now, I get out, and I see the Porsche, I see the door open, and I'm screaming. I'm hysterical. I'm trying to dial 911. It's raining, I'm trying, and I get through to 911, and they go, where are you? And I go, I'm on a country road. I name the road, but I don't know whereabouts on the road I am, And by this time, passersby had stopped. And now I'm going to thank a lot of people in this. So the first people I have to thank are the people that stopped first were a father and son. They were off-duty firefighters. They lived about half an hour away, and the daughter was with them, and I think the daughter is a 911 dispatcher, so she's also in the business. And they came and they said, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you hurt? And I said, I'm okay, but my father. And he said, was your father in the Sebring with you? And I go, no. And he was in the Porsche, and they're looking in the Porsche, and he's not in the Porsche. And I go, no, I think he was out of the Porsche. I thought I heard a tapping. But we're looking, and you know something? I really, I've told you this, Pop. We've talked about this. I've told you that I really thought you were gone. And as I've just told the audience, I mean, we're very close. We've had our differences. We've clashed at times. But at that moment, I was just anything to have my father back. I didn't want to look because I thought I really thought you were gone, I really thought you'd been crushed between the pickup truck and the Sebring. I thought they'd be looking for body parts, And I'm trying to explain this to the firefighter, to the off-duty firefighter, and they're looking, but they don't find anything, There's no blood, there's no body on the side where the pickup truck hit. And they said, look, you go and sit in our pickup truck. And the daughter took me, put a blanket. I mean, we owe those people a lot, They took me, and they said, we will find your father. We're trained in this. So they took their flashlights and they went looking in the ditch. So around here, and my father, and maybe a couple of minutes later, 5 minutes later, the son comes back and he says, we found your dad. And I go, is he dead? Is he okay? I mean, is he gone? And he said, he's okay. I mean, I wouldn't quite say okay, but he's alive. So they take him. They call 911, and I'm in and the ambulance comes. I'm trying to explain to the ambulance people what happened. The police come. I'm trying to explain to the police what happened. And as I said, it's kind of, you have to draw a diagram. It's kind of complicated. So the police come. The ambulance comes. They get my father on the stretcher. They take me in the ambulance with my father, and he's conscious. And they're asking him questions. What's your name? How old are you? How many fingers am I holding up? And they ask him, why is it a special weekend? And my father, it's Thanksgiving. But my father wouldn't know that because, we don't really celebrate Thanksgiving, So I said, ask him where he's going on Monday. So he said, where are you going on Monday, sir? And my father said, oh, we're going to India. And he said, the ambulance guy said, I don't think you're going anywhere for a long time. So they get us to Chatham Hospital. And they do emergency procedures. So they wheel my father in. I'm there. The police are there. The police have brought wallets. And I guess they're used to this kind of thing. They got my father's wallet. I think it was in his back pocket. They had to cut it out. They had to cut off his clothes. And my wallet was in the Sebring. They brought it. So we had driver's licenses and insurances and all of that. And they were very nice, and they asked me all kinds of questions. Before they left, they gave my father a ticket because he was blocking traffic, obstructing traffic, So, and at that point, we weren't even sure if he's going to survive. But, they were very nice. I have nothing bad to say about anybody there. Now, the people in the Chatham Hospital, they were remarkable, two young doctors, and they had me sign stuff. In the meanwhile, I'd called my mother's friend, and I said, don't tell her exactly what's happened. Just say it's been, just say it's been a little accident, but everything's fine, So, but my mother got really, really upset, even at that, And my mother's friend was looking after her, and then the only kind of little funny story here is that they drain the fluids with some cracked ribs. They find out that he landed on his neck, so one of the discs was shattered, and also fractured hip where the Sebring hit him, So fractured hip, neck, a broken disc, and that's the dangerous one because that could lead to a paralysis, So there were two doctors in emergency. One was an Indian lady, relatively young doctor, wears that headscarf hijab thingy. And Indian people, they do this thing, I don't know. My student and his friend are here. They're Chinese, and I think you have this in the Chinese culture too. But Indian people, they do this uncle and auntie thing, Even if you're not related, Do you guys do that? Call people uncle and auntie, older people. Yeah, he's nodding his head. So this doctor is calling my father uncle, even though she's never met him before. She's going, uncle, and she goes, and he's calling her beti, which means daughter, And she's going, uncle, don't move your head, because if you move your head, you could get paralyzed, until we ship you to, airlift you to a trauma in London. Until we airlift you, you could get paralyzed. So she said, Uncle, and he nods his head going, yes, okay. He nods his head. She's like, yeah, exactly. My student's covering his face, It's like, and she's like going, Uncle, don't do that, And then he's like going, are you married, daughter? What does your husband do? This is like the whole Indian thingy, So they're sort of a collectivist culture, We'll talk more about that another time. And then they call the air ambulance people, Orange. And these people, they're the rock stars of the trauma world. That's what I've called them, And they show up, and I got a couple of pictures of them, and and I took a picture of my father there because I wanted him, when he recovered, to see what had happened to him, and these people, they brought a stretcher full of equipment. And they just took over, these two, and there were two good-looking guys in their mid-30s, early 40s. And when I tell the story, they introduce themselves, and I think one, I'm not being disrespectful here, but I called them Chad and Brad. But it was something like that. It was like, it was like two names, it was like short names, and he said, I'm Chad, and this is Brad, and we're the ambulance paramedics, and we're going to get your father. They're going to my father, sir, can you hear me? Can you understand me? Can you move this? Can you move that? And then they unpack all their stuff, and they get my father, ready to be transported, and they've got all kinds of special equipment and drugs and amazing. And the nurses and I, we just, and they're telling nurses to do this, do that, and everybody, they got my father prepared, but I can't go on the helicopter with them. I have a phobia of flying anyway, but under those circumstances, I probably would have, But they get my father ready to fly, and I have to make my own way to London. It's about an hour away. So I kind of say goodbye, and by this time, my father is all prepped. And I can't tell you what they did. It was amazing. He's all prepped to be flown. And my mother was joking with him afterwards. His one ride in the helicopter, he doesn't even remember it, And so they take him away, and then I have to take a cab, maybe a half an hour, to the storage garage in the village where my daily users are, So I have to take a cab. They don't take Visa cards out in the country. I had to, my father's wallet, my wallet, I had enough money, $60. The cab driver, another person I have to thank, he drove me, and I had to go pick up the keys from the Sebring because I didn't have anything. We had to go to the wrecker's yard, get the keys, go to the Pacifica. I drove. I get to London Hospital, the trauma unit there. I talked to one of the head surgeons, and he says, we've done MRIs, we've done this, we've done that. We have to operate as soon as possible on the neck, because otherwise you have paralysis. So starts with that, and he says, and I said, look, they were supposed to go to India in 2 days. And he said, we're talking about last October, he said, if all goes well, if the first operation goes well, if the second operation goes well, if he does 6-7 months of rehab or physio, he might be able to travel to India by June or July of next year. So if all goes well. And I'm sitting with my father in emergency. I'm having to tell the story every time another doctor comes. And one doctor, a resident, came and he said, I heard your father was hit by a transport truck on the 401. And I go, that's a bit of an exaggeration. It was a country road, and it was hit by a pickup truck, and not directly. If he had been hit directly by the pickup truck, he wouldn't be here. But the pickup truck hit my car took the impact, but the car moved and it hit my father. So everybody's coming and talking to my father, and he's still somewhat conscious. Maybe 7-8 hours later, they operated. It was successful. And I had been up for 48 hours. The kids, I call them kids, they're in their 20s. They came, they brought blankets, they brought stuff, they sat with my father. I slept a bit in the waiting room. And then their mother, my cousin, she came, she brought my mother. My mother was very upset. And then my mother's sister who was visiting came, and I have to thank all the friends and family who supported and called and came. And then my father had the second operation on his hip. Then he had a minor stroke, but he survived that one too, and there's really no effect of the stroke, So and then my father was on, my father doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't, has never done drugs, and he's on heavy, heavy drugs, like Dilaudid. So he's hallucinating, and he's seeing animals coming out of the, floor and the ceiling and stuff like that, And they took amazing care of him, but to make a long story short, he was in that hospital for a month, one whole month, So during that time, my mother and I, and this was pretty hard on my mother too. I mean, I'm telling this as a story of my father's strength and resilience, but it was also for my mother because her health had already been declining, and she's going back and forth with me. Out of that month, only 2 days she didn't come. 28 days she came back and forth. It's that 3-hour drive each way, sat in the hospital with my father, and my father was, he would wait for us, and at first he couldn't go, he had to have a bedpan. My father has never been sick a day in his life. Earlier that summer, my father and I, we had one of our fights, and my father said to me, he said, I'm going to live to 100, and I'm going to live in good health. You're asking for trouble. I told him that afterwards. I said, when you say shit like that, when you go, I'm going to live to 100 in good health, you're asking for something to happen, and it kind of happened. But my father had never been sick before, so he's not used to this. He was not used to the bedpans and all of that. But he dealt with it all. And then, and I have to give a very big thank you to the social worker at the London Victoria Hospital, because I had to fill in all the forms, accident forms, insurance forms, and without her help, and I used to joke with her, she had an office on the trauma ward floor, and she would sometimes leave the office door open, so I would sit in front of her office on the floor with all the forms, because I couldn't figure out which, what do I put here, what do I put there, and where do I fax it, and she did all the faxing for me. And I used to joke with her that this was what students used to do when I was a prof. They used to sit in front of my office door with their papers or questions, and I think you did it too, my student, they used to sit on the floor in front of, and I told her, I said, I feel like a student again. I'm sitting on the floor in front of your office with all these forms, But without her help and without her dedication and without her faxing to all the different, insurance and this and that and cancellation flight, and I would have been overwhelmed. But we ended up getting a rehab company involved, and they found a place for my father. He couldn't come home. They wouldn't allow him to come home after the month. He had to go to rehab. It was like a respite home. So he went to one respite home in Toronto, and then to a second one where he was there for a month. And my mother was there with him, because so she was. It was a nice place, but they didn't like it. It was in a high-end seniors residence, So they were there for about a month, and then they came home. I had to have, Mom and Pop, I don't know if you can see, I'm sitting in this chair purposely because you can see a bit of the collection. And I'm going to have my student maybe take some photos of the rest of the collection to show people that, and this is a fraction of the collection, guys. People, for the audience, for viewers, this is a fraction. My father's a collector, not just of cars. So there were cabinets full of, Swarovski and Royal Doulton all over the hallways. And the rehab person wouldn't let him come back because he would need a walker. So I had to have all of that stuff packed up, put into storage where it still is, And then my parents have taken some of that stuff to India. So all that happened. I was going back and forth, and packing and doing this and doing that, and people are coming to visit. And then he came home. And then he was home. He was very happy to be home with the Geeta cat, And then I took him to London, Ontario a couple of times to meet the surgeons, and they gave him, and this is the incredible part, they gave him permission to travel by mid-January. Remember before, the first guy had said not before June, July at least, And by mid-January, they said, he can travel, So my niece, the lady I was talking about, and her son were going to a wedding in India, and they agreed to take my parents. So again, more people to thank. And they traveled with my parents in middle of January, and they took my parents back to India. And once my parents got back to India, they have household staff. They have 4 maids. They have a driver. My father's not driving, but he started another car collection. This is the happy part of the story. He's not only is he alive, he started another car collection. He's got 3. I'm encouraging him to buy number 4, So he started a car collection there. He's got a full-time driver, He's got, and now, this last weekend, my mother was very sick, and we at one point, we kind of feared the worst, but it turned out to be a false alarm. But now I also have to thank all the people there, their household, the people who are looking after her, were looking after them as well as I could, if not better, because there's more people there, There's people that sleep on the floor of their my parents' bedroom. They've got a 5-bedroom condo, but there are people who sleep there to keep an eye on my parents. The level of care that they're getting is incredible, And they helped my mother go to the bathroom. When my mother was sick in the hospital, one of the quote servants unquote slept on the floor, plus my relatives, cousins. So thanks to all the cousins, thanks to everybody who have looked after my parents as if they are their own family. I talked to them, but we were all kind of upset when they left because maybe we were thinking maybe they could come back in the summer for a visit, but I don't think they could travel. Next year, I don't know. It's not likely that we're going to meet again. So that's why everybody has been upset, But my parents are being very well looked after. So thank you to everybody there, And thank you to everybody else that I've mentioned, who I think helped, in this whole scenario. Now, my parents are there, I'm here, but I'm doing my podcast, I'm writing, I'm doing other stuff. And last thanks, I really want to thank, and Mom and Pop, we owe a lot also to the man standing behind the camera here, my former student, my producer. Yes, he's waving. And his friend who comes with him and helps, just as a volunteer, they come and they do all this. And my former student, he taught himself how to edit so that he could edit this in time for your birthday, because our editor is, elsewhere, is out of the country. He doesn't have to. He taught himself how to edit so he can do this, So we owe them a lot too, And I also owe my analyst a lot. Analyst, a big thanks to my analyst. Now that could be seen as transfers, but that's something else. So anyway, that's the story. I'm going to write this. I've been writing other stuff, but I wanted to write this. But before we actually write it, I thought I'd do it as a podcast. Okay, that's it. We've got way over here. Okay, so one more time. Happy birthday, Pop. And I'm going to do this again for your next birthday. Next one's a big one, 90. You're going to be 90 next year, and by then I expect you to have at least 5 cars in India, so you got to get 2 more, got to get a Mercedes, and maybe something else. So we got to get so by next year, 2 more cars, 5 cars, and you've got a cat there. Hi, Prince. Never met you. Hi, Prince. There's a cat there, and then and Mom. It's going to be your 88th birthday next year, and I didn't think of this before. Next year, 88, I'm going to do one of these for you, I didn't do it in August because I didn't think of it, So, bye. Love you both very, very much, and miss you both very, very much. Bye.